anything else to do but run wild on the ranch. He loved being there with his family, watching things grow. He used to pick oranges alongside the help and olives. Oh my God, the olives! He didn't like them. I'm sorry I cut my olive tree down, but every time I had it sprayed, I got 3 times more olives. When I moved there and saw the olive tree, I thought I'll never buy another olive. That didn't happen. Fact is, it almost spoiled my appetite for olives. He was very happy on the ranch. He was sad when his family moved back to Pasadena because that was the city, and he wasn't used to living in the city.
Perfect. You've just given us this great broad brushstrokes about La Mirada, going from the Neff holdings of the Neffs as a ranch to a city. You've watched it grow. To wrap up this interview, do you just want to tell us from your own experiences about what it's like for you to look back when you came to this neck of the woods back in 1954, 1955?
Well, I'm a city girl, born and bred. When I moved to La Mirada, it was a cultural shock. We had no street lights, we had no street signs, we had no streets, no sidewalks, no mail delivery, no phone service. We had an incinerator. We had to burn everything, which meant then we had to have a big, thin tin container to put the ashes in. It just was very rural living, and I surprised myself by loving it. It just amazed me. Wonderful neighbors. We had all moved in together about the same time. We have 4 original members still on my street. We share a lot. And there's about 6 who are second owners, which means they've been there at least close to 50 years. You don't really move from La Mirada. We only had 1 car, which my husband took to work. So we formed a little group. I would watch your kids, you would do my marketing. Our first post office was in a hardware store on Alondra Boulevard. Our second one was in the old train station. And we had a postmaster, because Leela Criswell made a point that you don't call her postmistress. She was mistress to nobody. And she would allow my neighbors to pick up my mail and vice versa, which was wonderful. We finally got phone service down the block. It was a Pacific, and it was a toll call. I could call Alhambra, but I didn't know anybody in Alhambra, so it didn't do me any good. We didn't get mail service for several years. The greatest person was the helmsman. He carried bread, all sweeties, and cigarettes, because we used to, most of us all smoked then, for shame. I was surprised myself because I was so used to being in a city, a big city. Los Angeles is big. And here I come to this little rural area and loved it. Loved the closeness of the neighbors, how we all helped each other, and loved La Mirada.
Thank you, Myllie. You did it. That was fantastic. That was fantastic. I want to thank you for talking to us about your own time in La Mirada, and Bill, who obviously was a great guy. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. As you know, I don't stop talking, so you have to shut me up.
My name is Maria Schütze-Coburn, and I'm at the University of Southern California's Feuchtwanger Memorial Library, and you're listening to You Can't Eat the Sunshine.
Claudia, we're here with you. We're in Duarte, California. We're on Old Route 66 on Huntington Drive, and I need you to do two things. Introduce yourself properly and give us a little more detail as to exactly where we are.
I'm Claudia Heller, and I'm president of the Duarte Historical Society, and of course that gives me a lot of interest in Route 66 and the Trails Restaurant. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences with the Trails Restaurant as a customer.
Hold on, you're fine. Tell us, this is the site of the former Trails location, right?
And this, where we are standing now is right at the site of where the Trails Restaurant once stood. It was built back in 1952 and lasted on Route 66 for over 50 years. I was there as a customer maybe one night every couple of weeks because we would meet in the lounge. And the lounge was important to us, as was the restaurant. We could listen to the music on the organ, or we could sit up at the bar, or we could just sit back in the lounge chairs and enjoy company. And we'd always see somebody we knew would walk in from the neighborhood and pull up a chair, and we would spend the evening. And if we felt like it, then we would stay and we would have dinner.
Perfect. We talked before we started the interview about making the auction as a really good starting point. So why don't you tell us about the auction, but after the Trails had closed. Right. So actually, why don't you just, jumping into the auction, give us the year of the auction, just so we get a sense.
The Trails was closed in 2001, and shortly before it closed, they had an auction wanting to get rid of all of the plates and the cups and all of their tureens and all of the things that they had used throughout the years. They didn't really want people to come in and buy souvenirs so much as companies coming in and buying it for another restaurant. We walked in, and there was a sign on the door that said Sentimental Journey, and we surely felt that was appropriate for this event. While I was there, I looked over and saw a lady that was walking around, and I began to talk to her. Her name was Sylvia Price, and she had started working at the Trails as a young lady after she and her husband left Kansas, took Route 66, and moved out to this area. She worked at the restaurant for almost 50 years. When it closed, she didn't know it was closing. She went to work as usual and got there and found out that the restaurant had closed. And she was very, very sad about that. So she was walking around sort of in a daze. Other people were buying things in bulk. And I know the Encanto restaurant that was up on Highway 39 had purchased, I believe, some of the leather seats or the naga hide, whatever it was, and had moved it over to their restaurant eventually. And some of the people would go up there to get a taste of the Trails. However, they've closed now, too. The back bar from the Trails was sold to a place in Fullerton called the Continental. And so a couple years later, we went to the Continental, sit there and visit the back bar and kind of reminisce. The Trails got to be very busy on the weekends, not so much during the week. And I remember one night when we were there, somebody had threatened to jump off the bridge on the freeway. So the freeway was closed. And it happened to be Valentine's Day. So a lot of people were backed up. All the cars, it was like a parking lot. But we had gotten into the Trails early, so we had a seat, and we were sitting there eating dinner. And we called over one of the waitresses, my husband did, and said, would you mind if I could have some water? And she looked at him, and this was such an example of the crusty waitresses that were as crusty as the cheese bread sometimes. And she looked at him and said, you want water? You're lucky you have a chair. So we always think of that as a fond memory of the trails.
I want us to jump into, as we discussed, give us a day in the life of the trails. I think
Sort of did.
Yeah, I know, but just
The trails became an important part of life for us because it was a meeting place for the people who live in Duarte and people outside of Duarte. Maybe they had a drive-through on their way home from work, and they would meet their friends there in the lounge. The lounge entertainment was famous all over, and the entertainer was Jim McEwen. He played there for many, many years, and it's said that he knew over 5,000 songs. If anybody would yell out a song, he would probably know it. They were also known for their theme nights, and one of the themes was "Come Dressed as Your Favorite Song." So I saw they had a display case, and they had one of the costumes there. It was a map. It had been starched, so it was stood alone, and it was a map of Georgia, and of course it was for the song "Georgia on My Mind." I heard that after they closed, the organ player went to the Encanto restaurant for a while, and then they closed, and I don't know what's happened to him since then.
perfect. You did it. Good, good. I'd like. You mentioned the back bar being sold to the Continental. Some bar areas being taken up to El Encanto. The trail sign was sold. Give us a bit of the Okay, yeah. Give us a bit of the pedigree of some other external signs of the trails.
Okay, when the trails closed, I tried to get some of their menus and was told that they had been thrown away. And I wanted them for our historical museum, and I wanted to donate some of them to other historical museums. So I called, and I was told that they had thrown them away. I called a friend of mine named Jack Collins and asked him if he would go over to the dumpster behind the Trails restaurant and retrieve any of the menus that he could find. They were in a nice leather case, and they were very interesting, had a story on the back of the Trails and how it started. So I thought it was very important to get some copies. When I came home that night, I had about 8 copies sitting on my porch, so we were able to get those. The huge sign, the one that rotated, it said dining on one sign and the Trails on the other. That sign was so big, it was taken over to the city maintenance yard, and it's still there. There was the stick sign, which was really the symbol of this icon, and I was able to get that. We didn't have room for it in our Duarte Museum, but it's on display at the Victorville Route 66 Museum, along with the wagon wheel chandelier that was kind of a symbol of the trails, and it's on display there also. Also, when they were tearing down the building, I was able to retrieve some bricks and had plaques made. So we have some bricks with the date and a little information about the trails. So even though we don't have our restaurant, we do have little parts of it around to keep it in our memory.
Perfect. Okay, you did it. We're going to wrap this up. I want you to tell us about the Duarte Historical Society, briefly, the museum, which is housed in Burr and Fitt's former home. Great. Right. Former district attorney for the county of Los Angeles. Before we do that, let's step back for a second, let's look west, and do you just want to call out the Boulevard Cafe and the Columbia before we wrap this up and you tell us about the museum?
We have a few other icons on Route 66 that we've lost over the years. One was the Boulevard Cafe, and it was very famous. They say movie stars traveling to Hollywood would stop there for a hamburger, and Red Skelton is one that they've always named. And it was taken over at one point for a shopping center, and we lost it in 1989. And about the time the Trails was raised, down the street to the west was the Columbia Bowl, and it was a lot of people really liked that place. It was a social place. They loved bowling. Other people said they wouldn't go near it, so they ended up tearing it down. There was a group trying to save it, so that was torn down also and replaced by a save-on.
Okay, thank you for that. Wrap this up. Just tell us about the museum and the Historical Society.
All right. Duarte Historical Society has been around since the 50s, and our museum is located on the west flank of the San Gabriel River. It's in Encanto Park, and we have a lot of displays there, one of which is a famous person who lived in Duarte, the big band leader Glenn Miller. And